Okay, I guess we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our quarantine stream 2.
Hi.
We have Nabeel Ahmed with us and Osama Khawer, who are our friends, and we're nepotistic like that. But if you want to be on the show, message us. Um, anyway, so today we wanted to talk about a few main themes. One of those is the economy, how we're going to survive, and another is this idea of the Garib Admi or the Garib Tabka and why they always end up worse off regardless of what policy you use. But first, we just like to start with a bit of a recap over the situation in Pakistan, how bad it really is. So we've hit 1,500. In fact, we've hit over 1,600 cases now. And this is after a lockdown, which I think is now a week old. But the first question, just generally, is how effective do you think the lockdown has been in flattening the curve, and how effective do you think it will be?
Who start?
Yeah, you can start.
Um, may I?
Yes, Sama.
Okay. So here are some facts here right now. So on 26th February 2020, we had our first case, right? And in the next 14 days, right, those initial 2 3 cases leaded to by about 16th or yeah 16th March, it leaded to about 184 cases, right? And that's how it works
Mm-hmm.
exponentially, right? One person goes out, meets multiple people, and that ends up, causing the virus to spread to a lot of people, right? So from those 184 people, 15 days on, we have seen approximately 1,500 cases, right? Um, Now, the quarantine was imposed around the 1,000 mark in the rest of Pakistan. Sindh was a bit earlier to do it, but it was still, overall in Pakistan, it was a late lockdown being imposed. So as of right now, we cannot really comment on how effective the lockdown was because so far we don't even know how many cases are present prior to the lockdown. It's only in the
Right.
next 10 days that we'll start seeing the effect of the lockdown, and the variable of the number of diagnostics that we're
Mm-hmm.
doing, that really matters here because we're saying 1,500, but it could be 50,000 for all we know because we're not really diagnosing people. We
Yeah,
don't have
I
the
think
testing kits.
the
At
estimates
least we're
were
working on
somewhere
that.
around 80,000 is the real number by around April 16th. But I mean, regardless of that, I think the what we're trying to ask is, even though it's too soon to judge it, do you think the lockdown will be effective, or do you think that because so much has already spread that it's hard to stop at this point? Nabil,
Nabil, you want to take it?
I think
Oh, he's
Nabil has
gone.
left us. Hopefully, not for good.
So,
He's having some connectivity issues there.
Shahrukh, would you
yeah,
like to comment,
yeah.
or Sama can continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, and lockdowns are absolutely necessary, but lockdowns are not all that are necessary.
Right.
Because lockdown is the first step. Social distancing would otherwise be the first step, but in some cases, lockdown are just more effective, and that's why Pakistan is now turning towards it. Whereas other countries like South Korea didn't necessarily have to do it. I think it has a lot to do with civic responsibility and less desperation to go out, which exists right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Second step would be, of course, and lockdown cannot just be it. We need to have increased diagnostics and increased capacity building. And capacity building means that we need to increase the number of masks that we're importing, increase the number of masks that we're producing ourselves. And there are a lot of indigenous activities going on right now in order to produce masks, right? Small business owners are turning their efforts from other textiles to production.
Right.
But I think we really need to step this up, right? So, for example, in the United States of America, there exists the Defense Production Act, right? Which is about in times of emergency, we're going to appropriate private capital and use that private capital in order to work for the public good and the need at the time. And that is exactly what is required in Pakistan at the moment in time. And I'm not saying we need to go, the government needs to go into people's bank accounts and take their bank accounts and take people's homes and turn them into isolation centers. I'm saying that things that are not essential right now could be used for a much greater public good at the
Yeah.
moment.
Acha,
To
on that
be,
point, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
So on that point of things that are not essential right now, इसी masks and the surgical equipment that we are receiving now, उसपे I feel like one more thing that is not essential is the kind of political warfare that has now ensued ever since what do you call क्या कहते हैं PPP got some popular response after जो उन्होंने शुरू में इकदाम लिए उस पर उनको अच्छा पॉपुलर रिस्पांस मिला तो उसके बाद से we saw that the federal government tried to fire back in some ways and बीच में इस वक्त there's this debate going on कि अब जो भी मास्क आ रहे हैं सिंध गवर्नमेंट ने जी वो आगे फॉरवर्ड कर दिए तो उस पे भी उन पे वो कहा जा रहा है कि oh look at them trying to be popular, look at them trying to score some political points out of this, एंड देन फिर वो जवाब दे रहे हैं कि जी हमारा पर्सनल था ये क्या कहते हैं ये हमारे पर्सनल सप्लाई थी हमने उसमें से आपको दिया सो आई फील लाइक इस वक्त जहाँ पे हमारी प्रोडक्शन और जहाँ पे हमारी कैपेबिलिटी ऑलरेडी इतनी लिमिटेड है वहाँ पे इस तरह की छोटी मोटी आई थिंक पंखों से पढ़ने से भी वी आर moving away from what is the bigger picture right now, that is to save as much Pakistanis as we can through all of these
Yeah.
measures.
Yep.
Hmm.
All right. So the next thing that we
Guys,
want
can
to
you hear
talk
me?
about. Yes. Hi, Nabeel.
Yeah.
Hey, can
Nabeel,
you
can you
add me to
fix
the
your
thing?
orientation? I think you're at it and you're
Yeah. Am I
okay.
good?
Great. Yep.
Yeah, you're true.
And you're
Okay.
live, so everyone heard
Yeah.
that.
All right. Okay.
Wave to your fans.
Hey guys, what's up?
Anyway, the next thing we wanted to talk about was this idea of reliable stats and how important it is to sort of judge the numbers in a way that is representative of what the actual situation could be. Because I think internationally we've seen the numbers rising, as Howard explained, exponentially. And I think the
Yeah.
US is a great example of this, where we've seen a really quick rise. Now they've gone far ahead of anyone else. In Italy, we saw the same thing, where even with the lockdown, they haven't seen too much of a dip in the numbers, and I think that's because there's healthcare systems are so overwhelmed at this point that it's going to take a while before they can sort of like stabilize the situation. Um, but within this, how effective do you think, or what do you think should be the course of action? And like, is there enough data for us to really make an accurate prediction of when this will be over or what should be done?
So, can I start?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to say earlier, I got disconnected, is that it's not exactly exponential, in that people in an exponential graph, when in this graph, when people die, they stop being carriers, right? They stop infecting people. So it's
Right.
less than exponential in that sense. The other way, it's not exactly exponential, is that social lockdowns and other sort of curfews and other measures to keep people inside sort of flatten it already a little bit, because an exponential graph would assume no intervention, right? But one thing that we've seen in terms of testing is so the best example is, I saw this, was Iceland versus Netherlands, right? Both European countries, both fairly good with resources. Iceland chooses to and can test everyone, anyone. If you don't show symptoms, you can still get tested.
Mm-hmm.
Netherlands does, well, they have like, so Iceland has like 360K people, that's it. Netherlands does testing only when there are severe symptoms. So they have a lot more people, but they also only test. It's not that they're poor, but they only choose to do it then. In Iceland, because they test everyone and 50 to 70% of people don't show symptoms, they can catch a lot of young people who have it and then keep them at home. So they get a very accurate picture. They get a very accurate picture. In Netherlands, the peak of cases is in the 70 to 79 bracket, because that's where people show symptoms the most. So the closer you get to random testing, the closer you get to testing for everyone, unfettered access, the better,
Right.
the more accurate you are. That's what South Korea did when they had drive-through testing. They were testing 50,000 people a day.
But I mean, a
So-
lot of this comes from the ability to sort of mobilize that sort of like
obviously.
resources to be able to do
I'm just
that. Of
describing
course,
the best case
the
scenario
best case scenario.
would be. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've recently sort of, I think Pakistan's also tried to develop its own, some doctors and NUS have, scientists in NUS have come up with a
Yeah.
test that I think gives results in 5 hours. There's one in the US that is being developed, which will give results in 15 minutes. But again, we don't know how effective these will be. And even with current testing, we don't know that they're only accurate approximately, I think, 80 or 85% of the time. So the question is this: how do we get the entire world to start testing its citizens more, and does it really matter? So what we know for a fact is that with this disease, a lot of people will go through symptoms and cure themselves while sitting at home without ever having need to go to the hospital or see a doctor or
Yeah.
whatever, because home remedies will work. Um, so if that is the case, how important is testing versus just having people just making sure that people stay home, and then if they have symptoms and need to be treated, they can come to the hospital. Because testing may give you an accurate result, but just testing in and of itself will not reduce like the virus or slow it down.
No, I think that testing, just a quick comment, testing
Mm-hmm.
of a different form, which is called an antibody test, right? So this, and again, not an expert, but an
Yeah, yeah,
antibody test is yet to be developed. And the good thing with an antibody test, if it works, is that you know if you've gotten COVID and if you're recovered from it, and now you can go to work.
mm-hmm.
And that can happen after a significant mass of people are affected,
Of
and then
course,
if this
yeah.
works, वगैरह. तो
But again,
वो तो
there's
तभी होगा, वो जब, sorry, just ending, वो तभी होगा ना कि when that test is developed, and until then it's not, and because 50 to 70% of people are asymptomatic, testing is almost always better than not testing at all, right?
Right.
Then
Yeah.
so yeah, the more you sort of increase your ceiling for how many tests you can do, you can be much more specific with who gets a lockdown and who gets to go out.
Yeah. Yeah. But I feel
so
like
guys,
that
there's
might give rise to like a whole new form of discrimination.
Yeah,
Mm.
but
which you can
again,
already see.
Yeah.
there's one interesting thing to notice about this is that we still don't have any proof, or actually, I think up to conclusively वो बोल भी चुके हैं कि it's very much possible that you can just get it again. So even if you have gotten it and you've recovered from it, I feel like there still might be questions regarding who still gets to go to his or her office, because you might still develop that condition again if the
Arya
germ
लगाएंगे
or
ना?
if the virus itself is still kind of out there.
Yeah, I think largely immunity is a thing where most people जिनको हो जाता है वो immune हो जाते हैं, लेकिन of course we've seen lots of cases now, I think 3 or 4 at least in like the last week, who've relapsed kind of. Um, so yeah, that's also a danger. Yeah. Sam, were you saying something?
Yeah, I was saying, at least for medical professionals, what you can do then is, and it's happening in the UK right now with the NHS, that the doctors, what they're doing is that they're observing how many of the doctors are getting the virus, and then they're essentially putting them under quarantine as soon as possible, so that as soon as they're well enough, they can get
Yeah.
back to work, and the ones who are at work right now, they can be quarantined. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you take turns in that way so that your medical infrastructure can continue on and well, deal with whatever situation is arising.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the next question. I think this has become a big issue in Pakistan, especially because our prime minister has made sure to talk about it in every single speech. Um, uh, in a way, it's admirable, I suppose. But who are we to judge his intentions? The idea of the daily wager and the Garib Tabka and these people who for whom the country needs to stay open, and that's sort of where this the narrative of the resistance against the lockdown came from. Um, I mean, now I guess it's a moot point because I think the lockdown has been sort of put in place, but you can see drives across Pakistan to sort of provide for these people. Governments are trying. I think the Sindh government has set up a fund for this as well. Even the federal government is at least trying to provide for these people, but of course it's not enough, and there's still a lot of people who don't have enough money to survive. Um, I think the question really is that in a time of crisis, can you really blame governments for not being able to cater to millions of people who will go hungry because they depend on daily wage workers? And then, so is it really a problem of policy on the part of a specific government, or do you think it's a problem with this with the larger system, and that there's nothing to do but sort of deal with the symptoms at this stage?
Uh, Abdullah, let's say I think there was a fair bit of conversation on this in the last screen that we were also doing. But again,
Mm-hmm.
जैसे पिछली दफा भी हम discuss कर रहे थे, and by the time we had posted our first podcast, even uh, वही बात है कि like it was always a thing that the lockdown is inevitable, and the kind of effects on the economy it's going to have is also inevitable. Like हमने आज करना है या हमने 12 दिन बाद करना है, लॉकडाउन होना था, और जिन ममालिक में भी नहीं हो रहा है, जहाँ पे इतना स्प्रेड नहीं है, वहाँ पे भी इवेंचुअली जब ये लाइक 2 से 6 केसेस होंगे, उनको भी ये पॉसिबिलिटी सोचनी पड़ेगी और उनके लिए भी हकीकत होगी। लाइक मशरिक ममालिक है, यहाँ का है, देखो इकोनॉमी पे उसका थोड़ा बहुत तो वो फर्क आना था, असर आना था। बात
Mm-hmm.
सारी ये है कि अब जो जो निज़ाम है ना, द कैपिटलिस्ट सिस्टम, या जो जिसकी वजह से वी आर सीइंग सो मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स दैट दीज क्या कहते हैं, आपके ये वाले डेमोग्राफिक्स जो फेस कर रहे हैं, आई फील लाइक इट्स जस्ट अनमास्किंग अ लॉट ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम्स दैट ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्ट। लाइक
Mm-hmm.
आउटब्रेक हो ना हो, ये मसले एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, दे आर जस्ट कमिंग आउट अ लॉट मोर, लाइक हमारे लाइक ऑन आवर फेसेस राइट नाउ। और
Right,
आई थिंक
right,
कि
right.
ये अच्छा टाइम है इस सबको रिकॉग्नाइज करने का, ताकि हम इस पे काम कर सकें। वुड लव टू हियर अदर थॉट्स एज वेल।
So the fact is that even in the US and European countries and everywhere that the relief packages are going out and policies are changing,
Mm-hmm.
ये बात I think COVID-19 sort of brought these things like Shahrukh said to the fore, but they also brought to the fore that a lot of countries had the capability to deal with poverty
Right.
that they weren't
Yeah.
exercising until they were forced to, because a virus doesn't discriminate, right? So if you
Yeah.
have your house help and your house help can now transfer the virus to you and you are rich, now you have the incentive to then help poor people when earlier they weren't really hurting you in
Right.
any
Or if
way,
you're an
right?
industrialist, you need your
If you're an
labor.
industrialist, exactly, right? And that's
Yeah.
actually a better case because on the macro
Yeah.
level you want everyone in the economy to sort of work and be healthy,
Yeah.
right? But ye
Acha, in
abhi
our context, so you can also become an internet sensation by just sending them home.
so I don't want to recreate the meme, but yeah. Basically, I think the one thing that this sort of is indicts governments anywhere and everywhere is that, and billionaires as well, right, in other countries, where you always had the capability to help these health systems, but you chose not to until it was, well, वही बात हो गई ना कि हमने बात की कि 12 दिन पहले लॉकडाउन हो या 12 दिन
Mm-hmm.
बाद हो. In 2015, Bill Gates at a TED conference said that the biggest problem we can have, sorry, that's the azan, biggest problem we can have is a pandemic, and that's waiting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's 4 years of preparedness, 5 years of preparedness that at least developed countries could have taken, right? और हमने नहीं
Yeah.
किया.
Mm-hmm.
तो that's an indicting sort of fact.
I know, but I think that the problem is also that you can see that this is not like a problem for a specific type of system. You see that this has had an impact globally, and I
Everywhere,
think I think
yes.
that in hindsight, actually, if the numbers aren't fudged, that China has actually dealt with it the best, because they have the world's largest population in order and to be able to contain that to 80,000 cases versus or 85,000 cases versus the U.S. with a 36 million people population now are at close to 150,000 cases. Just shows that China's policies were extremely effective because they acted fast and were able to mobilize resources and like concentrate healthcare and industry toward this specific sort of situation. And so, what Osama do you think is like is the problem in terms of how these systems or economic systems or governance systems set up that causes this?
Uh, So I'd say that this entire fiasco has brought to light very fundamental principles that govern our societies right now. Principles such as the social contract and what is the relationship between the citizen and the state, and that is coming into question at this point in time because as of right now, what's promised is that the state will take away certain rights of yours, certain privileges that you have by virtue of being a citizen born in this country. And in return, it's going to give you certain services, such as the right to life, by giving you a healthcare system, giving you an education, things like that, right? Now, what a lot of modern liberal economies have promised is that the market itself will give you those privileges. It's going to
Yeah,
give you those provisions as long as the government is in place to just regulate and make sure
Yeah.
nobody's stealing from one person
yeah,
to another person, right? That is coming into question at this point in time because when people are realizing that this entire system is so fragile that just one pandemic is all it takes for everything to go haywire, then people are starting to question what they need. And that's why right now in the United States of America, which is arguably one of the more libertarian countries present right now, countries that believe that there should be minimal social services and privatization is more important. In
yeah,
America, you're looking at the biggest relief package that's ever been given to citizens, right? China, I think, has been able to effectively work through this crisis because it has a different conceptualization of that social contract. It has a much
Yeah.
more hands-on
Yeah.
approach by the state, and it doesn't see corporate entities um, as the most important stakeholder to protect at this point in time.
Right.
Which is why when this crisis happened, the first thing that China was able to do, and the reason why it was able to mobilize resources, was not from a sense of corporate solidarity, but more of a sense of we understand that you are a corporation, but as of right now, you are required to produce X, Y, and Z for the benefit of all, and there's no question about it. And that's how it should be, and that is the only thing that will salvage us from this crisis,
Yeah.
essentially.
Acha,
So
doesn't sorry, yeah, please.
I'm just gonna say everyone is a socialist in a pandemic, right? That's basically what we've seen, right? Bernie Sanders' ideas that he's been sort of championing for much before there was a pandemic are now
Yeah.
very natural, but he obviously doesn't get the credit on the Senate
Yeah,
floor because it's what is obviously the thing to do. But again, back to being prepared for these things. If your overall structure was better, people would have better homes to go back to, would be more secure in their jobs, and social distancing would be easier without worrying about the stock market, right? But वो
Yeah.
चीजें नहीं थी. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Shahrukh, you were saying?
अच्छा इंटरेस्टिंग इससे सवाल जो है वो लीड अप करा है बट यू सेड समथिंग रियली इंटरेस्टिंग हियर कि एवरीबॉडी इज अ सोशलिस्ट इन पेंडेमिक लेकिन जहां तक बात आती है फॉर लाइक अ लॉट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड लीडर्स और द लॉट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक फोरम्स जैसे कि वर्ल्ड बैंक हैज बीन टॉकिंग अबाउट डेट पेमेंट्स इन दिस सिचुएशन कि इमरान खान ने जैसे मुतालबा किया ममालिक से कि आप ये कर्जे जो हैं इस वक्त इस सिचुएशन की वजह से माफ कर दें वहीं पे जो वर्ल्ड बैंक है उन्होंने बोला कि जी डेट पेमेंट्स को आप रोक सकते हैं इस वक्त मजीद इस पे चार्ज ना किया जाए और फिलहाल के लिए इन अपकमिंग पेमेंट्स को आप रोक दें तो लाइक यू सेड हर मुल्क को इस वक्त एट द एंड ऑफ द डे जरूरत भी है अपने रिसोर्सेज की इन वसाइल की ताकि वो अपने आप की मदद कर सके हाउ फेयर इज इट और हाउ अनफेयर डू यू थिंक इट इज फॉर इमरान खान टू बी आस्किंग फॉर टोटल राइटिंग ऑफ or let's suppose like even delaying payments right now because literally everyone could use the money to be put into their healthcare facilities right now.
Okay, so I'll take a stab. The thing is that it's very convenient to look at a pandemic and say, okay, this all of debt should be written off. But obviously, he's also asking countries that are themselves affected and
Yeah,
can't afford to lose money, right? It's a market
exactly.
overall. I mean, sort of the opposite of a rising tide, right? All boats are getting lower because everywhere it's bad, right? The only problem is that I think the only sort of fair answer to this is like writing off debt for America is considerably more, or China or what have you, is considerably more trivial in terms of saving a life. For every, let's say, $1 million that they write off, more Pakistani lives can be saved versus fewer American lives lost, right? When there's bad
Yeah,
policy, it doesn't matter how much money you lose. So from a philosophical perspective, अगर आप reparations को देखते हो ना, reparations are like when you're already doing something wrong and you want to you've done something wrong and you want to sort of repair it. यहाँ पे
yeah,
reparations का sort of एक real timing scenario है कि how much money can you give right now to ease suffering and where can that write-off do the maximum benefit? And no one is really interested in answering that question right now because once you go down that line, there are many cases to like war or specifically regional epidemics where
Yeah.
you should have written off debt, right? Earthquakes, right? जहाँ होता भी होगा मेरे ख्याल से. But then if write-offs mean, like Abdullah said earlier, if write-offs mean postponing them, then at the very least, I think that's possible. I think
yeah.
America or China or other countries also suffer if Pakistan and other South Asian countries can't export properly. So I think वहाँ तो write off करना ही चाहिए मेरे ख्याल से. At the very
Right.
least, I think philosophically that's a good reason to consider it and ask for it.
Right. Right. And I
There's
also think that,
also
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Osama.
there's also an economic point of view here, right? Because effectively, if we're not able to tackle this pandemic and we're not able to stop it from spreading further, and if we're not able to deal with the poverty that is increasing because of it, how will the multinational corporations that are owned by the Western states work, right? Because the
Yeah.
least developed countries are the ones who provide them the labor, and so they have a self-interest in this case, to provide any sort of relief and as much relief as they can, to be honest. Apart from the moralistic argument made by Nabil.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that was sort of well put by all of you guys. I just think that overall, it sort of makes sense for people with less to give to people with more, or sorry, people with more to give to people with less, or at least,
You're talking about
um,
Reverse.
status quo. Status quo,
yeah,
basically.
deal with it like that.
Uh,
um,
I just want to add one
anyway,
thing.
yeah,
This is true for states, but it's also true for corporations. Is that times of crises are usually when you cede as a citizen, you cede the majority of your rights to governments and even corporations, right? So this is a Silicon Valley example, but it applies to any large corporation anywhere. Is that this is used as a reason to put out PR pieces that would otherwise get negative publicity, and to
hmm,
enforce policies where, for example, in America, if you get a bailout, that bailout becomes a sort of grant if you don't lay off people after you get the bailout. So what a lot of firms are doing is they're laying off the maximum amount of people for the next few years before they get the bailout, and then they won't have to lay off anyone. But they're already starting
okay,
to sort of make themselves unnecessarily lean, and that comes at the cost of working class people, right?
yeah,
You work on the front lines of any large firm, you get laid off because of this. We saw this in 2008, and then they get the bailout, and then they're lean, they're ready to go, they're ready to use that money for fewer people and get more bonuses. So
right.
that can happen anywhere. Unilever or Angro could do that tomorrow, and we wouldn't be any the wiser. So
Yeah.
that can happen anywhere in the world.
Exactly. So speaking of that, we've discussed sort of like how people who are from the working class or are less fortunate often get sucked up into the worst circumstances, regardless of what the situation is. Like if there is any form of crisis, they will be the worst affected. Sorry. But then the question is this, right? Like, based on the current world systems, is there such a thing as good policy? So we've seen a lot across the world where countries have tried and failed to deal with this crisis in an effective manner. I think we can maybe have a handful of examples of countries like Iceland or South Korea. Iceland, perhaps because it is so small and also wealthy enough to be able to do what it did, um, or South Korea, which is just impeccably well sort of governed. But I think on the whole, you can see that most countries have failed miserably in dealing with this. And I think we're about to be the latest on that chart. And I think so. What exactly is the problem, and why is it that every single world leader has failed?
The thing is, good policy will seem alarmist and redundant and sort of prone to paranoia up until the pandemic is over, and then it makes complete sense, right? So this doctor in the US or somewhere else, I'm not sure, but basically his line of thinking was that if you sit at home and you criticize government because you can't go out to the bar or pubs or watch games with your
Hmm.
friends, then and afterwards you said, well, that did nothing, and the nothing there
That's the
is that
point.
nothing there is that nothing happened to your own family,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's because of what we did. And these are there are network effects of this, right? You not
Yeah.
going out is saving, like the first is saving a lot of lives, right? So the first February 26th case, up until he was dead, or like if they traced his contacts, he's responsible for a lot of cases in Pakistan. And if had he traveled earlier or
Hmm.
later, the number would have looked much different from 1600, better or worse, right? And
Right,
so
but
you,
yeah.
you don't see, from a policy perspective, all policy will seem alarmist. The only problem is and you can say this for Pakistan's case, is that when policies start to seem alarmist to your political leadership, then they start to delay things, and then they start to get wary and hesitant about doing them, and then that's where it's no longer a good policy.
Right, and I think that's sort of what's happened, not just in Pakistan, with there's immense reluctance from the federal to sort of like initiate a lockdown and like see it through in the way that I think some provinces have been asking for, especially Sindh. But I think it's not just us, right? It's not just Imran Khan. We've seen this across the world with even Donald Trump saying that it's really important for us to support the industries, and he's looking in 2 weeks to reopen the country at Easter, which is ridiculous, right? I mean, it doesn't sound like smart policy, nor do the stats back it up. But
Bolsonaro in
then
Brazil.
Bolsonaro in Brazil, exactly, and I
Yeah.
think Modi in India as well, who has initiated a lockdown late, albeit, but
Yeah.
he's done it in the weirdest way possible, where people simply can't get to homes or their houses because they've shut down
Yeah.
all public transport, even essential services. So what is the problem that no one is being able to no at least like large scale country has been able to find an effective way to deal with it, and dealing with both the factors of dealing with people who are underprivileged, who require that sort of help, as well as sort of slowing or flattening the curve.
May I?
Sure.
Yeah, so I feel that while democracy is having all of their benefits as they do, they're inherently in a disadvantaged position for times of emergency such as this one right now, right? Because at the end of the day, politicians are not just specifically looking at what is the good of the people, but they're also looking at what will eventually lead to my re-election and whatnot, right? Because
Hmm.
those questions will always be tied
Right,
whenever we're in a
but those two things should be the same ideally, right?
uh,
Yeah.
I don't think that is essentially possible, and I don't think that's ever been achieved in any human
Yeah.
society before. But perhaps we can have increased constitutionalism and achieve something like that. But point being, that's why it's important to look in times of emergency to the more executive branches of the state in order to act and in order to work for social welfare. So, for example, that's why I'm a bit more happy and more pleased to see that the NDMA, the Disaster Management Authority, is being given increased charge to control the situation.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, those people do not have to worry specifically about how they look and the optics of the entire matter.
Right.
They have to look at what the technical expertise tell them, and they have to make judgments according to that. Of course, there are some downsides to that, in the sense that what these people prioritize with regards to what the public good is. But I still feel that such organizations, such institutions are less prone to meddling from other interest groups, as in the case of democratic leaders, because democratic leaders are also then accountable to their donors, they're
Yeah.
accountable to the industries that they are part of, and so those things can really prevent them from doing the best or creating the best policies.
Right, but I mean, like, even so, you would imagine that in a crisis like this, you would put some of those things aside in order to work for the betterment of literally millions, right? And I think people have, I'd say, even earnestly tried in some cases, but even so, they failed. And not all of the governments I'm talking about are ultra capitalist governments. A lot of them are governments that have some sort of socialist leanings. Singapore, for example, has dealt with it well, but then again, have a big
Singapore,
problem in terms
the
of
thing is,
how, yeah,
Singapore bans chewing gum, and so no one.
exactly.
So Singapore has better uptake of these messages, right?
Yeah, I think
People
that
are
people are used to
respond
the
better.
extreme
Yes,
measures of, yeah,
exactly. People respond better. I think that's a big. One thing I want to say about that is, in African countries, you will see generally a better understanding of what curfews and lockdowns are because they've had Ebola, right?
yeah.
In China, you'll see better uptake of health messaging from the government because they've had SARS and MERS, the earlier SARS virus,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
in America, the individualistic culture where there are literally anthropologists and sociologists going and saying Americans have never had to hear the word no in terms of, let's say, going to the bar, right? And in terms of walking outside, it's what it's
I
their
mean,
is their
I disagree. They were
yeah.
told no at one point in history.
No, but I think the fact of the matter there is that generally there are, like, if you have that indigenous understanding, that conceptualization that Osama earlier said, on like the public's front, then policies are better received. If policies aren't well
Hmm.
received, then you have that crisis of a man of a policeman begging a person to not go inside a mosque to worship, right? Because it's outside. उसकी गुमान में भी बात नहीं आती कि
Right.
आप मस्जिद नहीं जा सकते, right?
Huh.
In Tanzania, or I think one of those, the president said that a virus cannot survive in the body of Christ, right? So our Christian population can just go out and do what they want. You'll be fine. Go to church, right? When it doesn't come from the leadership, or if it isn't picked up by the people,
Hmm.
good policies are not well good are no longer good in a vacuum if people don't believe them, right? So I
Yeah,
think that's a big
something
problem.
something really interesting I saw yesterday was that I think in Jhang in Punjab they have this new sort of walk through like thing, like a gate where if you walk through, like, so I think it's
Yeah.
like 10 feet long, and if you walk through it you get sprayed by, I think,
Mm.
soapy water or like Dettol or
Acha.
some form of
So
disinfectant. And
yeah.
apparently the claim is that they want to use that to put inside of or outside of mosques so that people can go walk through it and then go and pray in
Or
a,
they can see the
No,
examples of Saudi Arabia,
अच्छा,
or they can see,
guys, interesting thing about
or they
that
can.
is
No,
sorry.
go on. No, go on,
So
go on.
the interesting thing about that is that it was always supposed to be for healthcare professionals. Like जो वो छोटा सा dome है and you have to work through it. It's not affecting the human. It's affecting all
Only
जितना
the
भी आपका
clothes.
safety precaution gear है. It's supposed to be for that. एंड उसके बाद भी वही बातें आई थिंक मैंने कल कहीं कमेंट भी किया था तो उस पर मुझे वही लाफ रिएक्ट्स आ गए क्योंकि इन लोगों को ये बात तो समझ आती नहीं है लेकिन मैंने वही बात बोली कि चलो तुम्हारे कपड़ों से हट गया तुम्हारे मास्क से हट गया तुम अंदर जाके छींक मारोगे जब तो दूसरे को लगेगा ना इफ यू आर द कैरियर बट लोगों
Yeah.
को वो नहीं समझना वो कैट वॉक करने पहुंच रहे हैं मस्जिदों में that's क्या कहा जा सकता है इस बारे में
Yeah. So the
And I think it's
biggest
also a
problem.
tough position, sorry Nabil, for like our law
No, no problem.
enforcement because like the video that you were referring to, it's so difficult for someone who is even like in a decent position in the police to be able to say no to a mob or to a group of people who have Islam as their weapon because I think the problem then becomes is that it's sort of automatically taken as some form of like religious like problem where it's ये हमें नमाज नहीं पढ़ने दे रहे which I think is a big problem especially because I think the narrative from the state has not been clear about this and I think that one of the most important things would have been for there to be an absolute absolute clarity from the state from the Ruwat Halal committee from the Islamic Council to just say that this is a bad thing period you it's like there's sunnah to back it up and that you shouldn't do it and I think that's one of the biggest failings that we've seen from governments.
I think with
अच्छा
regards to
ये
that, the president's approaching to Al Azaz, which is one of the premier the premier Islamic madrasas that exist in the world, and they decide a lot of
Yeah.
questions on Islamic jurisprudence. The president had approached them, and I think that it is after they gave their recommendation that it's okay to close mosques in such a situation that our ulemas were at least to some extent able to chill. They haven't completely yet, but
So
we need to
27.
look at it from a culturally sensitive perspective in that sense because it's not
So
fair to simply tell a person that you can't go to the
yeah,
mosque when you think
yeah.
that that's what's going to save him from God, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's the approach we need.
So 27 Tablighi Jamaat members were recently found positive with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that in some district administrations, I'm not sure here or in India, but I think it was here, loudspeakers with hadith and like their loudspeakers पे बता रहे थे कि आपको ये सुन्नत भी है हदीस भी है कुवैत ने ओमान ने सऊदी अरेबिया ने बैन किया हुआ है but then when you say कि it's the thing with Surah Kafirun, right? If you say कि my religion is mine and yours is yours, then people will just respond and say you're using Islam in the wrong way. So
yeah
in terms of Islam being a weapon, I don't think it's enough when people want to be very specific and contrarian about the way that they understand Islam.
Mm-hmm.
उन्हें लगता है कि it's anything is a full frontal assault on their religiosity and not in
Right.
terms of उनको आप काबा की तस्वीर भी दिखा दोगे ना तो उनको उसमें भी कोई नेट पिकिंग
हाँ
नजर आ जाएगी.
एग्जैक्टली आई थिंक ये वही मसला है कि लाइक इवन दो यू वुड टेल देम कि यार सऊदी अरेबिया की गवर्नमेंट ने भी अभी हॉल्ट किया हुआ है चीज़ों पे आई फील लाइक द
हज
रिस्पांस इज
बैन हो
स्टिल
गई हज कैंसिल हो गई
हाँ
है.
आई थिंक वही
but
लाइक आई मीन इन I just feel like there's a problem where like the religiosity is entrenched in a way that it sort of promotes ritualistic like practice as the forefront of religion. And I think that in Pakistan, this has become a growing issue where people feel like it is an absolute necessity for them to go to the mosque on Friday, or else they will not be as Muslim, or that if they're not allowed to do that, it is some form of like an attack on their religion, or that
yeah
this
and
is the state
interestingly
going away from. Yeah.
सॉरी वो आवाज रुक हाँ सो इंटरेस्टिंगली जो आप मजीद ममालिक की भी आई थिंक इस वक्त एग्जांपल्स दे नहीं पा रहे हैं अगर हम बात करें सऊदी अरेबिया में भी जैसे वो बात अब चल रही है कि शायद हज भी कैंसिल हो जाएगा तो ये तो यहाँ पे कह देना इस वक्त किसी काम ही नहीं आ रहा बिकॉज अब हम लोग इतने ज्यादा डिवाइडेड हैं विद इन आवर ओन बिलीव्स इज वेल कि हम बोल रहे हैं कि अच्छा अब सऊदी अरब भी गलत साइड ऑफ मुस्लिम्स पे आ गया है ना इसलिए ये नहीं हो रहा और लाइक वो भी थोड़े गलत तरह के मुस्लिम हैं इसलिए उन्होंने कैंसिल किया हुआ है हम बेस्ट हैं अच्छा विद दैट पॉइंट आई वुड आल्सो वांट यू गाइस टू टेक अ लुक एट द कमेंट सेक्शन वी हैव अ फ्यू कमेंट्स जिनको हमें
Yeah, we
एड्रेस
have
करना चाहिए एट
someone
दिस
from
पॉइंट
Saad Rashid who wants us to talk about herd immunity,
या
Oh
and what that's
man.
a
So the problem with herd immunity is that all you need to know about herd immunity in Pakistan, in the world for coronavirus at least, is that, well, so here's what herd immunity is, right? The assumption is that a lot of low risk people will get infected once. They'll see through the painful few days of what it looks like. It looks like a flu. आपको हल्का सा फ्लू होगा, आपको फ्लू की तरह के सिम्टम्स होंगे, इट्स गोइंग टू बी कोविड, एंड देन आप इम्यून हो जाओगे, और अब आप बाहर जाओगे तो यू कैन नो लॉन्गर बी इन्फेक्टेड और इन्फेक्ट अदर पीपल, द इकोनॉमी विल बी रिस्टोर्ड बिकॉज हर इस तरह का एम्प्लॉय वापस चला जाएगा. एंड यूके में कंसेप्शन इसकी एक महीना पहले तो ये थी कि we will allow herd immunity to take place. We will get as many low risk people, usually younger people, which in itself is a problem, right? And younger people are getting infected and are dying, right? People as young as 18 and 20 are dying in developed countries. So एक मसला ये था. इसका दूसरा मसला ये है कि it's very hard for low risk people to go out and come back and not infect high risk people like your grandfather and your grandmother,
Yeah.
right? So वो तो, and the third thing, this is really important, is that in flu, the R naught value, the value of how many people you infect, is 1.3 to 1.4. You infect an average of, like, if you could split it that way, 1.3 to 1.4 people. यहाँ पे it's up to 3 people. So it is going to spread faster, right? And not everyone is low risk. And low risk का मतलब ये नहीं होता कि आपकी उम्र कम है. अगर आपको अस्थमा है, आपको दमा है, आपको रेस्पिरेटरी डिजीज है, या आपका इम्यून सिस्टम जनरली वीक है फॉर वेरियस इन्वायरमेंटल एंड न्यूट्रिशनल रीजंस, वो डेली वेजर्स का भी वीक होता है बिकॉज they work outside a lot, and China में generally weak होता है, pollution is bad. So
Yeah.
then you see these problems. So herd immunity was dropped by the UK government, which was the only sort of developed country working for herd immunity. And now, so जैसे शाहरुख ने या किसी ने कहा यहाँ पे कि it's not also proven कि you can't get reinfected yet.
Yeah.
So वो भी, that's a big sort of puts a damper on the entire idea.
Yeah. I think someone else has some questions about. Yilmaz has commented about how Italian bars were offering 2-for-1 drinks at the start of the soft lockdown. And I think that is a good example because we've seen this across the world where people have been really reluctant to take it seriously. And I think even in Pakistan, there were tons of discounts that were popping up just before the lockdown started because they wanted people to start ordering food and stuff. And I think that, like, I don't know how to what extent you can blame businesses for like taking advantage of the situation, but to also great extent there's a human problem with this sort of opportunism that is sort of also needs to be addressed at some point.
उसकी तो आदत डाल रहे हैं वो तो हर महीना, अभी अगला महीना रमजान है, उस तरह के लोग तो आपको मजीद they will pop up and अब ये चलता
A
रहेगा.
whole new discussion on what Ramzan during Corona will be like. But
Yeah.
So we also have another question from Saad Rashid, who's I think wondering about why there isn't a vaccine yet and why it's taking so long. Yeah, just the quick answer to that is that a vaccine isn't a quick process. It's not two people in a lab putting a couple of test tubes together and then voila. I think it's even if a vaccine is developed, it takes months to test it. There's lots of trial periods. Obviously, they have to check for multiple side effects, etc., etc. And I think we have come a long way as a society because I think in 1918, the Spanish flu lasted 3 years before they could find a vaccine for it. We're likely going to beat that by, be at least twice as
Quite a
fast.
bit. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
To add
So,
a positive information here, so there are some promising results coming out of one drug, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. It's
yes,
not
Trump agrees with
been.
you.
I know he does, but as of right now, the FDA, also the Food and Drug Administration in America, also approved it to be used as treatment, and a lot of doctors, even in Pakistan, are using it.
The thing
Don't
is,
bother going to the pharmacy to buy
yeah,
it, though.
but I think we should give two disclaimers. One, we are not doctors here. And the second thing is that in America, in Arizona, a man is dead and his wife is in critical care because they sort of indiscriminate, like without discrimination, sort of followed this advice, right? So this is a last resort drug, and it's
Wait,
also
they used a fish tank cleaner which had
right,
that
right,
chemical inside, so
yeah,
they had it.
yeah. The thing is generally that it's also the drug of choice for lupus, for some kinds of arthritis. And
Yeah.
the fact is that Sindh mein to khatam ho gaya hai na, matlab people have been sort of stockpiling and hoarding it, and sort of this is a very cheap drug and it's anti-malarial, right? In like at least our use is anti-malarial. So for us to just go out there and without any symptoms, without any reason to just stockpile on this is another sort of panic buying for
Yeah.
something that you don't even know, like don't sort of effectively know that it works, right? हमें
I've
नहीं है
been taking the
coronavirus
drug
that we
for
right.
I've been taking the drug for a year now, and I've been told today by my doctor that it's not available, so
Wow.
stop taking.
Wow,
You really saw this coming. Um,
Yeah.
no, but
Someone
Yeah.
step out and
yeah,
see
I
if you
think
can.
that Also the last thing we wanted to talk about was, I think, overall just the economy, and what do you think life will look like after we're done with this economics wise? Do you see this as like an avenue for like a post-war rise of different countries, different industries, or do you think that we're just going to be in a bad position like we were in 2008?
I feel like the best of countries will sort of look to adopt towards a kind of a system of governance that ideally does not lead to something like this again and again. I imagine it to be close to a socialist democracy if you
Yeah,
are to put a label onto it.
yeah, I can
But
imagine the U.S. elections will be affected by this.
yeah, but I guess the main idea is for a lot of countries to start following suit on like strengthening their healthcare systems. But उसके अलावा just generally a lot more assurity when it comes to जैसे कि अभी पिछले दिनों पाकिस्तान में I saw this and I know इसका इतना ज़्यादा खास तो कुछ नहीं होना लेकिन वो एक पूरा float कर रहा था क्या कहते हैं petition के universal basic income हम चाहते हैं कि जी
Mm-hmm.
पाकिस्तान में आम हो.
Mm-hmm.
तो इस तरह के बड़े नए सवाल उठेंगे. आई फील लाइक वही काफी होंगे अगले 3 से 4 साल चेंजिंग द कोर्स ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स वर्ल्ड वाइड, नॉट वर्ल्ड वाइड, जस्ट इन पाकिस्तान एज वेल. आई फील लाइक इसका इतना तो ट्रिकल इफेक्ट होगा कि वही बात है ना कि कोई चीज को एग्जाम में आने से, सेट होने से, पॉलिसी में आने से पहले 3-4 साल हम उस पर बात करते हैं, हमें समझ नहीं आती, आधे लोग एक राय पे होते हैं, आधे लोग दूसरी राय पे. बट आई फील लाइक डिस्कशन कम से कम खुल सकती है फॉर थिंग्स लाइक यूनिवर्सल बेसिक इनकम, health insurance. Like again, it's wild that a lot of Pakistanis just don't have the idea of having health insurance, right? It's wild.
I mean, most don't. In fact, like I think you just assume that अगर आपको थोड़ी सी भी बीमारी होगी तो मतलब खर्चा आ जाएगा. And I think we're very
Yeah.
thankful to a lot of NGOs that provide free of cost healthcare. But I
अच्छा,
think that the
उसकी
state should not be dependent on that.
Yeah.
उसकी भी बड़ी रिलैक्सेशन जो है ना वो हम कराची में या सिंध में पर्टिकुलरली फील कर लेते हैं बिकॉज देयर आर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस लाइक सूट SIUT, सॉरी, देयर आर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस लाइक दिस
Indus
इंडस है,
hospital
होप है.
Yeah.
तो
hope है, हाँ.
मतलब वो हर जगह पे भी नहीं है. लाइक दैट्स नॉट द केस इन नवाबशाह, राइट? तो
Yeah.
नीड अ स्टेट वाइड सपोर्ट, क्या कहते हैं, for these kind of organizations. Yeah, at least we need some state organizations to pop up in place of these.
Absolutely, yeah.
Osama?
So yeah, so yeah, sure.
I feel that so already we had some level of socialized healthcare system coming into Pakistan. That's been on the agenda in this government and in the previous
Mm.
government to some extent or the other. But I'd like to make a comment about international relations here and about the United States of America and if its economy will really even be able to recover from the coronavirus. I feel that at the end of the day, economics and just like politics is, and it's a competitive venture, and it is at the end of the day, United States is competing with China at all times, and the way things are looking right now, Chinese economy and political system is hurt a lot less than the United States at the present moment in time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you might be
I
looking
think
at a
with
very
the I
different
think with the US, we've seen, I think a lot of people have just sort of realized that the whole Trump facade is sort of broken down because they've seen that at some point you do need a competent leader to sort of take charge and get things done. And I think that Trump has failed to do that, not only with his policy but even with his words. I think he hasn't been clear um, or even simply like comforted people with anything. I think it's just been up in the air, and I'm imagining that the elections might be affected by this, unless of course he puts a ridiculously good spin on it, as he has done in the past. Um, also, Nabil, though, I wanted to ask a follow up. Just like, what do you think the economy in Pakistan will look like in a post Corona world in terms of like the amount of people that have already been laid off? I heard yesterday that the Citizens Archive of Pakistan, where I think you've interned before, laid someone off without pay, violating their contract.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of this because the argument is that they simply cannot afford to keep you on. What does that mean for people who will be jobless by the time this lockdown is over, people who cannot put food on the table anymore,
So,
and industries that might shut down?
Achha, I have
so
just one more
yeah.
thing before you to
Yeah,
add
yeah.
before you answer that. There's also the point of actual translation of these policies जो कि अभी तक in place भी हैं. So like a lot of countries and a lot of leaders have said कि अच्छा हम ये होने नहीं देंगे कि आपको नौकरियों से निकाल दिया जाए. जैसे कि
Yeah.
कनाडा में भी ट्रूडो ने ये बात की थी। तो मेरा एक आखिरी सवाल इसमें ऐड करने का ये है कि हाउ मेनी ऑफ द पीपल कैन एक्चुअली इवन ट्रस्ट द गवर्नमेंट्स जिन्होंने ये बातें कर रखी हुई हैं। जैसे पाकिस्तान में भी हमने देखा है कि जो जितना भी सिंध ने ये पैकेजेस ऐलान किए थे वो अभी तक बांटना भी शुरू नहीं हुए हैं, बिकॉज हफ्ते भर से उनकी टीम ही सेटअप नहीं हो पा रही है इस बारे में। तो जस्ट एडिंग दैट के द गवर्नमेंट्स दैट हैव गिवन अश्योरेंसेस, हाउ मच डू यू थिंक इवन दे कैन sort of keep up with those promises?
So I think एक चीज ये है कि the assumption is that there's going to be like a straight immediate sort of aftermath of coronavirus, right? It's very likely that this will become an endemic sort of seasonal recurring thing where you'll get smaller peaks in the future, right? Before we find a vaccine. And then vaccines का पाकिस्तान में पहुंचना, deploy होना, rural population तक जाना, यहाँ पे एबिट का ड्रग जो इस हफ्ते मैन्युफैक्चर होने लगना है, एबिट का एक आई थिंक देयर इज अ ड्रग आउट और देयर इज अ टेस्ट आउट, सॉरी, अ टेस्टिंग किट, वो भी पाकिस्तान में मई तक नहीं पहुंचना, इम्कान तो ये है, राइट? सो द फर्स्ट थिंग इज दैट द इकोनॉमी वोंट be immediately different. I think the one thing that Pakistan and other countries will have in common is that the inner life of a daily wager, or like the inner life of a homeless person, let's say even London, or jahan pe it's hard to imagine that they can do hand washing on a daily basis, they don't have access to sanitizers, they can't stockpile the last person to get to, like say Tesco or Carrefour, they are not allowed to a lot of privileged areas jahan pe चीज़ें मिलती हैं, उनकी ज़रूरत भी बेसिकली उनकी इकोनॉमी रुक जाती है बिकॉज पीपल आर्ट ऑन द स्ट्रीट एनी मोर. आई थिंक देयर विल बी जनरली बी अ लिटिल मोर प्रिपेयर्डनेस एंड लिटिल मोर सॉर्ट ऑफ ये रिलीफ पैकेज का तभी फ़ायदा ज़्यादा हो सकता है इकोनॉमी में जब आप इन द फ्यूचर इसको only pandemic के लिए ना सेव करें. If there's no structural change from the economy, I'll be really disappointed. In America, even I feel there's going to be a lot more scrutiny of bailouts, indiscriminatory bailouts to airlines or transport companies or large firms, right? अभी से सवाल उठ रहे हैं, अभी से socialist critique हो रही है कि इनके अपने पैसे कहाँ गए? They used all their money for stock buybacks and they had nothing saved up for a rainy day. They lost 50% of their revenue stream, only 50%, right? And they suddenly can't work anymore. They have to lay off half their staff. ये जो Sinza Archive की यहाँ पे बात की, वो तो थोड़ी सी, now it's already a company an organization that pays people less, but it's very, for Pakistan's perspective, there's a lot of elite capture of policy making, right? Policy making is captured by elite. Sugar mills की बात कर लो, जिसकी भी बात कर लो, right? There might be a lot more critique in Pakistan, but we also, I don't think, we also don't have the sort of socialist leadership to take it up in, let's say, the Senate or the Assembly. Us had tak.
Right.
One thing that will be sort of true in the economy, and this applies anywhere, that consumption generally will then shift from things we find luxurious to things we find things we never figured would actually run out, right?
Like toilet paper.
Thank God we don't use toilet paper, but in Al Fatah, in the newest Al Fatah store in peak DHA Lahore, I found people, when I came from Lahore a few weeks ago, I found people fighting over soap. These are educated people who have 3 cars in their homes and they've never had to fight anywhere except maybe Sapphire or Khadi, and now they're fighting over soap. And that's true, right? We'll see that there's going to be that gap that will always exist between the elite, between the Maria Bs and the people who work for Maria Bs. वो हमेशा रहेगा, लेकिन there'll be generally a lot more preparedness and a lot more sort of prudent consumption of goods. वो तो होगा, because people can't really expect from the government all the time.
Okay, so this is my last question. Sorry, Shahrukh, you want to say?
हाँ, just a little more interesting वो observation या I think prediction मेरी ये भी है कि like he talked about the consumer pattern changing from luxury to essentials. वहाँ पे I feel like generally how humans have been treating the world in general, मुझे एक feeling that I get is the fact कि as soon as everything starts getting back to normal, हमने भी देखा है कि oil prices गिरी हुई हैं, हमने देखा है कि जी multiple resources हैं जो कि इस वक्त because of demand and supply and XYZ reasons उनकी prices कम हैं. So as soon as we step out, I also kind of see us just shunning a lot more responsible alternatives and going back to that exact same behavior.
Yeah, that's very true.
जैसे कि हमने अभी देखा है कि चाइना के ऊपर से कितनी सारी जो पोल्यूशन की लेयर है वो हल्की सी जो वो है जा चुकी है, तो
वो वापस आ जाएगी.
वो अच्छी बात है कि इस वक्त हमने दुनिया को सांस लेने का मौका दिया हुआ है, लेकिन जब दुनिया रिज्यूम होगी और तेल की कीमतें इतनी गिरी हुई होंगी और हर कोई बस पागल हुआ होगा, तो मुझे तो लगता है कि I feel like we're going to have a much worse off
So
effect.
in America, the EPA was sort of defanged in the last week, the Environmental Protection Agency, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि from an industrial perspective for economic growth, they can't follow clean energy anymore, right? In China भी उन्होंने कहा है कि हम pollution की अपनी limit जो हम रखते थे वो remove कर रहे हैं. Once lockdowns end, we need to go back to maximum economic growth चाहे जो भी आपको environment पे damage हो ना. पाकिस्तान में तो already this is not something we think about. So what Shahrukh said is that it's going to go back to sort of full maximizing the economy mode without any care for without any care for what the earth is going through afterwards. ये हो जाएगा. People are going to come back. There are already memes about how the moment lockdown ends, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to drink all night, I'm going to party all night, and people miss work right now, right? So from an
I'm going to
economic
go to
perspective,
KFC.
yeah, exactly, right? So, from an economic perspective, I think habits will come back in full force. The only thing to sort of gain from this, the only lesson I hope that governments across the world take is that, obviously, the environment, which is harder for people to sort of understand, but also generally health systems capacity, right? If you don't invest in health for infectious disease control, this is what happens. So, I think,
Absolutely.
so if you maximize the economy but spend it the correct way, and if you spend it here, then I think there might be general long term benefit.
I think at the very least, one thing that might come out of this as a consequence would be increased accountability with regards to the healthcare system, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, there are a lot of healthcare support units that exist in cities and especially in rural areas where there aren't hospitals. There are only rural support units, right? In their cases, there are just far too many such units without any functioning, you know, instruments present there. There aren't doctors there. There aren't nurses there, right?
Yeah.
So, if anything, this pandemic has taught us. It's taught us that we cannot look at the healthcare system or any other service delivery, such as education, even as a thing that will compete in the market. It cannot compete
Yeah.
in the market. It's a basic human right. And if in such a pandemic as the one right now, if we are not providing healthcare to everybody, then the entire social order will be uprooted. Once people will run out of food to eat, our walls will not protect us. Our guards will not protect us anymore. And
Yeah.
so it is in the self-interest of even the capital owning class to also, at the end of the day, work
Provide
towards
the
improving.
opiate for the
Yeah,
masses. Yeah.
absolutely.
So we
That
have
is,
one question. I think we're almost done. We're just gonna. Like, we have one question from Rafi Mansouri in the comments who says, "Do you guys think a state without an adequate safety net, that is Pakistan, lock down the country without martial law and coercion? How's that going to affect state business and state relationships, especially since the state doesn't have any recourse for people out of work?" Any of you want to answer that?
I think the assumption that martial law is unique in enforcing certain policy is not itself correct. I think if you have enough sort of buy-in from people, because I do feel Allah na kare kabhi ho, lekin I do feel the next pandemic will have people a lot more prepared generally, and a lot more sort of willing to go with even like a civilian democratically elected government's procedures and lockdowns and curfews. For a lot of people, one thing to note is that for a lot of people, in the absence of martial law, in the absence of very heavily imposed curfews, vagera, even a lockdown becomes a curfew, right? Because they are daily wagers. Sorry, because they are daily wagers, and because for them the economy, for them sort of earning a living means going out. Back to the original question, I feel it's not that the government doesn't have a safety net. It's that the safety net, like BISP, ka jo Benazir Income Support Program,
It's
the
too
new
weak.
Sindh fund, not just too weak, but in some, well, it's adequate in some senses, but in other senses, I think it's you can easily cheat it in some ways. In some ways, BISP is just one aspect, right? So you have to be on a poverty index above certain, below a certain
Hmm.
threshold, right? 16.17, I think, to actually come for BISP. But then BISP bhi bada masla hai. What about women who don't have CNICs, right? That's also a problem in Pakistan. So it's not that there's no safety net; it's that sometimes the holes in the net are too big, right? It's very porous net; people fall through. And in Sindh, you see a lot of proactivity in terms of the government putting things out. So what they're doing, the government is doing. One interesting thing is that they're looking for your bank accounts. You apply as a daily wager. They've proposed that they'll do this. You apply as a daily wager. If you have more than 10K in your account, you won't get the new relief that they're providing. If you have been to Hajj and Umrah recently, you won't get the relief. So it's not that we
Mm-hmm.
already know that resources are limited, right? The way to sort of
Right.
smartly and judiciously spend resources for maximum return right now is something that a democratic government can still do, right? It's not just a problem of who's running it in terms of, let's say, a military or the government. Uh, I think it's more
Yeah,
in terms
perhaps
of
it's down to bureaucrats.
perhaps, yeah.
Acha, but there's also this question in the same comment about the state and citizen relations, and I
Okay.
feel like we have a very interesting take on how we react to the state from one moment right to the next one. Just like last week we had superhero CM Sen, and this week we have seen very poor translation of everything that was being claimed. So he is back to being X, Y, and Z, and we are hearing chants like bloody PPP.
असलियत दिखा दी.
Right, वापस वही आ गया कि वो रंग देख लिए, यही तो था, बस ऐलान ही कर सकते हो. तो स्टेट और सिटीजन रिलेशन बड़े मजे के होते हैं पाकिस्तान में. हम हर नए दिन किसी को अब्बू बनाते हैं, अगले दिन नया अब्बू आ जाते हैं. तो ये भी आई फील लाइक जैसे ही हम इससे निकलेंगे हम सब भूल जाएंगे कि सिंध का इस वक्त क्या रोल था. Whatever packages were announced, and everybody will be back to essentially square one. I don't think उसमें इतना large impact होता है, because as the Pakistani awam, we have a very short attention span when it comes to looking up to politicians. वो फौरन से we move to the next one.
One thing I'll say is that in the last two elections, Lahore and a lot of other specifics or northern Punjab regions have consistently surprised people by voting in the same people who give them patronage. So एक चीज तो सच है कि पाकिस्तान में patronage politics mean that people will vote for people जो उनका भला करते हैं. So I think there will be some sort of comeuppance for political parties that only promise. And if they don't go much beyond promises, there will be an electability problem, and then you'll see this in 2023 or in any elections or any sort of uptake of political messages. कि शायद रैलीज पे लोग कम आए, शायद लोगों को सच्चाई वो पता चल गई है, right? That might still be a
Yeah.
thing. At least the good thing is in Pakistan, a poor person, if or any low income sort of underprivileged person or anyone who relies on the government and the party specifically, we aren't much affected, let's be honest, by what party is in power, right? Because we have that sort of security. But a person who is very quick to change sides. And I think that's why there is an onus to sort of provide for everyone and anyone within your constituency. And that's how I think local democracy at the very least should be, right? A farmer is not
Absolutely.
selfish. A farmer is not selfish in voting for the person who gives them better irrigation, right? And
Yeah.
so if healthcare becomes the thing, if millions of people are dropping like flies because of COVID, and one party is doing better than the other, or one party is taking more initiatives, and that initiative is being realized, तो वो बात पाकिस्तान में जरूर नजर आएगी. In Trump,
Lekin still
like you
there's no
can't.
competition. What do you do about that?
Sorry.
There is no political competition in interior Sindh. So how do you improve the system in that sort of case?
So I wouldn't say it's not there, but I do think it's pegged to things like feudalism and family politics,
No,
and
the only
some
political opposition to the PPP you
is the
get in
GDA.
interior Sindh is
It's
exactly,
GDA.
or
Yeah.
the PMLF, also based on
Sure.
feudal
Yeah.
politics. So
Mm.
So I do think I don't think it'll entirely be like I don't think it'll be amazing accountability, but I do think that at the very least people will be quick to get disillusioned, right?
hmm,
Mm.
And that disillusionment is almost always better if, as long as someone comes in and takes the fore. I know you're right about there being like sort of the best competition you'll get is somewhat lesser evil versus like a good party. But मैं बदीन में गया था, and there was a person there who said, I'm not going to be exact, but they said कि if I'm voting for this other person from GDA, and it's not that the PPP ka leader is not that the GDA ka leader is a smaller asshole, is an asshole, is that he's a smaller asshole, right? He's just
Yeah.
less of a moron, right? So I think people go in understanding that these are the options they have,
Mm.
but as long as they get that patronage as a client, right, in that
Mm.
sense, they'll be happy to change sides because उनको फर्क पड़ता है, हमें नहीं पड़ता, and we usually
Mm.
go on ideology, but people who go
yeah,
on delivery will be affected.
yeah, that's true. I do think that there's a problem in Sindh which is greater than in other places in Pakistan, which is that I think they see patronage as sort of as the favors that they've been done, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
villages in Sindh, you have serfs or people who have worked on like feudal lands, who then feel like they owe it to them to vote to them, vote for them. वही like the the common saying vote to bhutto ka is obviously a problem. But on the other hand, I think that the PPP has shown that they are capable of better.
Yeah.
And so I think we can all hope that all parties of Pakistan can sort of come to the fore and like just get together
Yeah.
and sort of do something good.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. All right, guys.
Anyway, thank you guys. So thank you very much to everyone who's watching. If they're still watching, please donate as much as you can. We'll put in the comments a Google Doc with NGOs and government
Yeah.
accounts that are accepting donations. There are people going hungry. There are people who are not having fun on Netflix. Think about them, and yeah.
All right, guys.
ऑल्सो प्लीज ये आखिरी बात याद रखें कि आपका ईमान और आपका इम्यून दो अलग अलग चीजें हैं। ये मैंने हर पॉडकास्ट में कहना शुरू कर दिया। इट्स बिकमिंग लाइक इस पे दो तीन लोग गुस्सा हो जाते हैं हर दफा, लेकिन थोड़ा सा मजा भी आता है बोलने का। सो
Right.
दैट बीइंग
All
सेड,
right, guys. This was great. Bye bye.